Welcome to a brand new season of Ink Differently, the podcast that dives into the vibrant world of personalized product decoration. I'm Rhonda, your host and education manager here at Sawgrass. In each episode, I'll be chatting with the amazing minds behind Sawgrass, as well as talented Sawgrass users just like you. Together, we'll uncover inspiring stories, expert tips, and the cutting-edge innovation that makes Sawgrass the industry leader in sublimation printing and customized product design. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this season is packed with creativity, community, and game-changing insights you won't want to miss. Welcome to today's episode of Ink Differently. I'm Rhonda, the education manager here at Sawgrass, and I'm joined by Mike Hohler, who is a member of our research and development team. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, not a problem. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Mike, I have some icebreaker questions for you, some things to help our listeners get to know you a little bit better.
All right, let's do it.
All right, what are 3 words that describe you best?
Determined. I'm good at trying to get something accomplished. Can also be a little bit stubborn sometimes too. Curious. I love learning new things, and the third word's always the toughest one for me. I would say a little bit creative. Maybe not in the way our customers are typical of, but when it comes to developing new ink formulas, I'm like, well, what if we try this crazy idea and just throw all this stuff together and see what works? So.
Yeah, I think those are 3 great words to describe a scientist, so perfect. All right, what's the best thing that's happened to you this week?
I had a steak that I cooked to perfection a couple nights ago that was absolutely delicious, so I'd say that's probably the best thing this week.
Did you grill it?
Yeah, grilled it, seasoned it with special seasonings, and then finished it off with a little bit of butter on the end, and man, it came out perfect. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What was your favorite subject in school?
History.
Really?
Yeah. I really enjoy history. Usually mostly American history, and then New World history, like pirates. I'm really fascinated with the 1750s. And then the Viking era, and then the Mongolian Empire. Those are my big areas I really enjoy looking into, reading stuff, listening to podcasts. So.
Awesome. Now, we live in Charleston. Mm-hmm. Have you got to do some of the pirate tours downtown?
I haven't done any of them since we moved here. I did a ghost tour when I was younger and made a trip down here, but no pirate stuff.
Put the pirate tour on your bucket list because you will thoroughly enjoy it.
All right, I have to check it out.
It's fun because Blackbeard has ties to Charleston.
I think he raided Charleston, actually.
He did raid Charleston, yeah. And he was actually captured right as he was leaving Charleston, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so do the pirate tour. That should be on your bucket list.
Okay, yeah, definitely check it out.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
It, I guess, changed over the years, but the big one I remember was a marine biologist. Oh. But my mom always told me that they don't make that much money, so you probably want to look at something else. So
you just found another science, huh?
Exactly. Well, no, then I, thought, hey, maybe I'd be a good lawyer. I'm pretty good at, arguing with people. Then they told me you have to read a ton of books, and 18-year-old Mike was not a big reader. I enjoy it much more these days. And then I was studying engineering for a while, and somehow I ended up in making inks. So
perfect.
It's crazy where life takes you.
It is. It is definitely crazy. You hardly ever end up where you thought you were going to.
No, you don't.
All right. So have you ever won a trophy or a medal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've won a few. I played, when I was younger, I did a lot of swimming and won some ribbons and trophies and medals doing that. And then I did... through high school football and soccer. We actually won a state championship. One of my football teams in high school won the state championship. And then we won a couple tournaments for soccer, and then, some individual awards and stuff here and there. But
nice. What is the longest word you know?
I cheated a little bit. I saw this question beforehand, so I looked it up. So I'm going to give you one that I know for sure I know, but I looked up some long words before this, and I can't pronounce any of them. So probably I'm going with spectrophotometer. It's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good long word.
Yeah.
It's a device we use to measure color.
Yeah.
So, and it, works with Sawgrass and the ink. So
that's perfect. That is the
tying
perfect
everything
long
together.
word. Yeah, that works great. What is the best praise or advice you've received?
So the best advice that I've ever received was from my uncle shortly after my first child was born. And he told me, just remember, this soon shall pass. And I always repeat it, especially when you have your first child, there's a lot of late nights and a lot of crying, and you're like, how am I going to get through this? And I just kept always coming back to that and remembering that. And then at first it was really dealing with some of the more challenging times. And then, before I know it, my son's 2 now, and he's running around talking and doing all these crazy things. And I'm like, man, not that long ago, he was like just a little baby. And it feels like it's just flown by. So then I really kind of started, I really thought about it and realized it's like, no, everything will pass quickly. So kind of live in the moment, try to enjoy as much of it as you can.
Exactly, because the good passes just as fast as the bad.
Exactly.
All right, so which would you prefer? 3 wishes that you get in 5 years, or 1 wish right now?
I'm probably going to go with the 1 wish right now. And I'm just going to wish for a bunch of money and put that in a bunch of investment and growth accounts and just let it accrue interest over those 5 years. And then at a certain point, you'll have so much money that you won't need wishes because you can just buy what you need.
Perfect.
That would be my plan.
Awesome. Perfect answer. And thank you for playing along.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Well, Mike, let's start. You work here with us. Tell us a little bit about the journey that brought you to Sawgrass.
So it started 4 or 5 years ago. I was talking to a recruiter looking for new employment opportunities and mentioned I really wanted to be in the Charleston area. My parents live down here, my sister, brother-in-law, her 2 kids. So my wife and I were looking to be close to family. And then a couple years later, I got a call from that same recruiter about an opportunity down here, and it ended up being Sawgrass. So I spoke with Alex and Dimple and went through the interview process. Really liked, speaking with them, and then came down, did a tour of the facilities. Probably good for you guys. You had just finished moving everybody into the brand new building, and loved the facilities, loved the tour. Felt like I was a good fit, and ended up making the move and moved down here about 2 years ago. So loving it, enjoying it. So.
Awesome. Yeah, there's getting to be less and less of us that knew the joy of the old building, but this is definitely an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your role here at Sawgrass.
So officially, my title is Research and Development Chemist, but as I'm sure you know, working at Sawgrass, you wear a lot of different hats. So my primary job is working with ink formulations, raw material evaluations, trying to create new inks and improve our existing product line. But I also do a lot of work with printer development, working with the paper development, doing a lot of quality testing, wash testing, anything that's involved with testing our products, trying to find the points where they work really well and where they don't work at all. That's pretty much me.
Awesome. So what does a typical workday look like for you?
There's really no typical workday for me, but generally it starts with I'll usually evaluate some wash test samples that I let run through the evening. I'll look at those first thing in the morning, do some documentation, maybe put together a presentation so I can present those to other people within the company. And from there I'll either go into additional print testing or working on weighing up new inks and or filtering existing inks that I had already weighed up the day before, working with those. And then usually, a meeting or two, and then finish up by, prepping everything for the evening, if I'm running any testing throughout the night, getting all that set up and ready to go. So.
Wonderful. Now, I think this needs to start being a standard question for me to ask all employees of the company. How much did you know about sublimation before you came to Sawgrass?
Absolutely nothing. My background was in ink. I worked at an ink manufacturing company for almost 10 years, and we were doing more of the industrial, commercial type inks. So when I was first approached about Sawgrass and heard about sublimation, I was like, I thought I had been exposed to every type of ink out there, and then I'm like, sublimation ink, what's that? And immediately Googled it, and I was like, this is really interesting. I've never heard of this. Like, I'm curious how this interview is going to go, the interview getting hired here, and it was the amount that you pick up quickly working with these products. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is a very different ink than any other ink out there.
Yes, it is.
All right, so let's start with sublimation. Can you explain the sublimation process?
Sure. So how the sublimation ink works is you have to have a paper that's developed to accept sublimation ink. And you're going to go ahead and print an image onto that piece of paper. Once your image is printed out, you can go ahead and take it and place it on your substrate. It could be a mug or a thermos or a piece of metal or a polyester t-shirt. It has to have a polyester coating though. And then you're going to heat press it at a certain temperature. And as the product, the substrate's heating up along with that paper, the dye in the ink is going to go from a solid state to a gas state. And once it goes to that gas state, it's going to transition to that polyester coating. It's basically like, smoke from a fire kind of merging into that polyester coating, and it maintains, perfect color. It actually makes the color better from your print. It activates the dye and maintains the quality of the image on the piece of paper you printed. It's wild that this works.
Yeah.
The first time I saw it, I was like, I can't believe that this is a thing. It's the craziest way of printing I've probably ever seen.
I often call it magic because that just makes more
like
sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you've kind of answered this already. What do blanks have to work with sublimation? Now, you said a poly coating.
Yeah, it has to be, the product either has to be made from like a polyester or it has to have a polyester coating. I think some polyurethanes can work as well. But like polyurethane, polyester coating, or the product needs to be made from that to be able to accept the sublimation dye during the heat transfer process.
Yeah, so typically that would be something that you're going to buy from a dealer because they're going to have the blanks. They're already coated. You're limited though. You either have to be able to apply a coating yourself or purchase something with a coating. You just can't go buy a mug at the dollar store.
Right. I think there's some coatings that you can self-apply out there. I've done a little bit of work looking into some of those. Mixed reviews on how well they work, so your best bet is going to be to find a blank from a dealer.
It's typically working in tech support. What I always found
Yeah.
is that it's very hard to get the same even coating that they're getting on products because they're going through machines. They're not at the manual hand of a human.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about polyester fabric, what % do you say of polyester does it need to be to work well?
I think we've done some testing with like 60-40 blends, and it seems to work pretty well. I would probably stop at like a 50-50 blend maybe.
Yeah.
You might be able to get away with like a 40% polyester blend, but the more cotton you add into the mix of the blend, the less area is available to actually accept that sublimation dye. So your image you're not going to get as a high quality image. You might get something that stays for at least a few washes that looks really good, but eventually, where there isn't polyester fabric, it's going to wash out.
Yeah, so generally my recommendation is either 70 or 80%. But I always say, test it, get a sample of the fabric, do that first to see what's acceptable to you. Yeah, because there are certain designs that lend themselves to that. And then like you said, It depends on how long you want it to last for the person who's using it. If they only need it for 1 or 2 uses, you probably could go a little bit lower.
Yeah. Definitely don't want to do a photograph on like a 50-50 or 40-60 blend. It would probably not look great for faces, things like that. But you know, if you're just doing a general design, it probably you might be able to get away with it. So.
Yeah. Now, what color blanks do you recommend for sublimation?
White or light colors. The way the sublimation dye works, there's no white backing like you see with some other print methods out there. So whatever the color of that blank is that you're sublimating to, that's going to be the background that shows the ink color. So if you're using a dark background, it's going to mute a lot of the colors. You might be able to see some things, but like if you really want a good quality color, you're going to need to use either a white blank or a very light colored blank.
Awesome. Is there anything specific users should look for specifically when buying sublimation blanks?
I don't think there's anything like there's nothing that you're going to be able to look at either online or however you're viewing the blank that's going to tell you, hey, this blank is going to work great for what I want to do. You're just not going to be able to find it. The best thing I would recommend to do is probably look at, you're probably going to find like a higher quality sublimation blank going through a dealer than the first recommendation you get off Amazon. But with that being said, if the recommendation off Amazon works well for you and it's not a high cost, go ahead and get it, try it out, see if you really like what you're doing. If it's not quite the quality you're looking for, maybe explore a dealer or purchasing a more expensive blank. I wish there was a way to be like, if you see this and advertised or something, don't buy that, it's bad. But there's really nothing you can find. You really have to get some material, test it, see how you like it, and adjust on the go kind of.
Yeah, and when buying in bulk, even if you're buying from a reputable source, there will be times when things don't work. Yep. I got a bad batch of blanks a couple of years ago when I was doing service awards, and half the box was good, and in the other box I realized that you could not see through the coating, and typically you could. And that's when I realized there was an issue and they didn't work. Yep. But half the box was good, half the box was bad. It's just kind of the way things go sometimes.
Yeah, we run into that with some of our testing materials as well. We'll spend a lot of time working on an ink and it won't quite sublimate the way we're looking, or something just looks off, and then we grab another mug or something from a different box and everything looks great. So it's definitely something you got to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah, and if you're selling, it's something that you calculate into your cost.
Yep.
It's just like any other loss, whether it be your mistake or an issue with the blank, unfortunately, and it's going to happen occasionally.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you helped develop and test VersiFlex, which is our newest technology. Tell us a little bit about VersiFlex and why you think it's a huge development for our users.
So VersiFlex, as you said, VersiFlex is our new printing system. It allows you to do all of the sublimation blanks that everybody knows and loves with Sawgrass. But what we've done is we've modified the entire system to now allow you, using a special paper, to print on cotton, uncoated wood, and unglazed ceramics, along with some other crazy things I'm sure people will find. But it's all in one system, so all you need is one printer to be able to print on all of these different substrates now. You're not only stuck to either using a pigmented system to do, cotton or kind of like similar to DTF and DTG type prints, or you're not stuck to just the sublimation. Now you can pretty much do everything in one printer.
So it is that one all-in-one solution that everyone's looking for.
Yeah.
If a user has a Sawgrass printer with VersiFlex ink, what new products can they add? What kind of excites you?
So some new products, there's kind of the big three that are cotton, unglazed ceramic, and uncoated wood. But along with on the cotton side of things, any kind of fabric you can think of, you can pretty much VersiFlex, print on VersiFlex paper and transfer it to.
Now, what colors do your blanks need to be?
So they need to be same thing as sublimation. Since we're not using a white ink, they need to be light colors or a white color.
Yeah, and I often add in brights because I think a lot of the brights work really well too. So let's talk about cotton. When picking shirts to use the VersiFlex, what should our users be looking for?
Similar to sublimation blanks, we haven't come across anything in terms of a particular type of cotton that's given issues for VersiFlex. Obviously, you know, depending on where you're purchasing your product from, there's always a chance of it coming out of, you know, some facility here or there that there might be some chemicals or something in the fabric that might mess with the transfer. But you know, most of our blanks we're ordering from Amazon and doing all of our VersiFlex testing here, and it's just, you know, the general like Hanes or some other companies brand cotton t-shirts, they work fantastic.
Awesome. Now, when we talk about other fabrics, which ones work best? Which ones have you found don't work as well?
The only ones we've really found that don't work that well are like, you know, some leather, something that's like doesn't really have a porous kind of structure to it. It's more of like a solid, almost like a plasticky type structure. So like the ones we've had issues with are more about the durability of the fabric than actually the transfer process. So if it's a very thin fabric, you might have some issues getting, you know, the VersiFlex paper to release after the transfer, and could make it a little bit difficult. If you know, have something that's like a couple of fabrics with like glued together a layer, the heat press process will separate those, and that kind of ruins your print or transfer. And then I think those are really, I mean, there's really any type of fabric is really going to work well with this for the most part.
So the big things you're looking at are fabrics that are going to handle the heat, correct?
Yep.
And then anything with a coating is going to be a problem. So anything that keeps it from being porous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when we talk about the other products too, it's pretty much just a ditto. Porous is very important. Why is it important that it's porous?
With the porous structure, it allows for the ink and paper combination to get basically a good grip on the substrate you're transferring to.
Yeah.
As long as the paper and coating, the paper and ink combination is able to get a good grip on whatever you're trying to transfer to, you're going to be able to do a successful transfer. It's just a matter of, you know, getting the settings right on your heat press. So.
Yeah. So I've been really excited about uncoated wood, especially since over the last few weeks I've kind of mastered it and I've been getting good presses with the uncoated wood. What are you looking for specifically when we're looking at wood?
And you mean like in terms of what substrates work best?
Yeah.
So softwoods are going to be probably the best, you know, solid wood to go to. Particle board, plywoods, things like that work really well with VersiFlex. The ones that are problematic are more of the hardwoods, and they're just that hard structure doesn't want to necessarily accept the transfer. Now, with that being said, you know, we've had pretty good transfers on some hardwoods, so it's really a matter of just, you know, if you want to do a particular type of wood, get a small sample, get out and test it and see how it looks.
Yeah, and something that I've definitely noticed is I was in a craft store recently and they're all just kind of there. So unless you're really looking at the wood, you have to think about it a little bit. So it's not just simply pick up anything that has the bark on it. You kind of have to look at the bark.
Right.
One of my favorite days recently was I got to say, that appears to be birch. And birch is a hardwood. I love my job because I get to say things that most people would never say in life. Right. But yeah, so I always, so just to kind of pull back the curtain, whenever I find something that I have a question about or doesn't work well, it goes to Mike. Mike's my source. So that week I went to Mike and I handed him a stack of birchwood for him to test.
Yep.
and to play with. So what were your findings with my birchwood?
The big problem with those samples is that they're not flat. So, there's been a couple of things that I've seen in some discussions talking about like, well, you got to sand the surface or do this. It's not like sanding can help clean up the surface and you can get a better transfer as long as you make sure whatever you're sanding off gets cleaned off as well. But the big thing that sanding does is it allows you to have a flat surface on both sides. So you don't want like whatever you're transferring to, you don't really want it at an angle or, different, like a dip or a groove in the product. And with those birchwood samples, I picked it up and started playing with it, and I was like, oh yeah, there's a big groove right down the middle of this. Like, it's just you're gonna build up pressure on those outside pieces, and you're not gonna get down into that groove, and it's just not, without pressure, you're just not gonna get a good transfer.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest takeaways with wood, especially, is you're looking for something that's a flat surface.
Yeah.
And even with the unglazed, because I know we've had people who've tried some other things, you're really looking for something that's porous, but at the same time, flat.
Yeah. Like, if it's not perfectly flat, I found that, some of the test presses that we did, it wasn't perfectly flat and you didn't get a great transfer, but it, with that wood texture, it looks a little kind of rough, beaten up, a little rugged. Like, it actually comes out looking pretty good. So I wouldn't let that deter you from trying anything. Yeah. But it really, if you're wondering, hey, why didn't this transfer great in this one area? It's probably there's a little bit of a dip and you didn't build up as much pressure there as you did on the rest of the piece.
It's really similar to the conversation we just had about polyester, because a lot of it comes down to designing for the product you're using. So if you're doing a vintage look, that's going to look good on wood, even if it's not getting 100% perfect coverage. But if you're designing something that needs a lot of text or a lot of like just perfection as to being laid down, then you really need to be more careful. But if you're designing that vintage look where if there's misses, it kind of makes it look rough and tumble and how you want it, then that's actually, so you design for the product you want to use too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and especially if you're going for that rustic look, then the birch works more.
I like the rusted look. I thought the birch, some of the prints transfers looked really good, but we're trying a couple things to see if ways to come around that. We're still working on it.
Yeah.
So I'll keep you posted if we find anything.
Definitely, and we can add it to the comments so
Sounds
everyone
good.
can see that if we have an update. And then I could always just bring you on the workshop and let you talk more there too, right?
That's fine too, yeah.
We've found the most success with wooden fabrics, and I think to me those are the most exciting. But what other products should users try, or what are some things that you'd like to see people use?
So the big ones would be unglazed ceramic, I've mentioned it already, and then different types of stone.
Yeah.
Obviously stone comes in a lot of colors, so like darker stones probably aren't going to work that great with this, but like some of the lighter colored stones, I think there could be some really, really cool things done working with stone. And same thing with, ceramic. One of the personal ones that if someone can get it right, I would love to see someone do like a clay tile or something too.
Oh yeah.
I tried a lot of different types of terracotta clay tiles during the testing, and VersiFlex transferred great. It's just the tile couldn't hold up to the pressing parameters. So if someone can find like the perfect way the clay is cured and the tiles created that makes this work, I think that would be a really cool design as well.
Yeah, I know this is a conversation you and I have had. There's a balance because you have to get it to a certain temperature.
Yep.
So whatever it is has to be able to hold up to that. And when we talk about a lot of the ceramics, when we talk a lot about the terracotta even, you really have to have something that can handle the pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, so that pressure piece. Now, let's say someone is playing around with VersiFlex and they're not getting the results they want. Where should they start adjusting? What do you adjust first?
So the very first thing I would do is look at, you know, what went wrong with your transfer. So if your paper ripped off halfway through, like you tried really pulling the paper off and half of it stuck and the other didn't, I would look at maybe turning down your temperature a little bit or like playing with your temperature settings. If your paper released, but like some of the image didn't stick very well, you can flip that piece of paper over and just run your finger across the piece of paper where the image was. If you had a successful transfer, it should be kind of flat, like there shouldn't be anything there. On the outside of what your image is, it should be a little bit more rough, like you should feel some bumps. And if you're feeling bumps on the inside, I would recommend adjusting your pressure and increasing it a little bit more.
Because that would mean that the expander did not go all the way on there, correct? So if they've still got that roughness on there, that's the expander that they're feeling.
Yeah, like it just didn't, like, so the roughness that you're feeling is the paper, how the paper activated in the heat press process. And the smoothness would be, it wouldn't have that rough texture because what was activated with using the inks and expander transferred successfully. But if it's rough in your image area or after you press it, then yeah, it didn't, that expander didn't get fully released onto the
activation, the bonding just did not happen the way it should have.
Yeah, and that's usually indicating of a pressure adjustment needs to be made. And then like paper ripping or not releasing from it, to me it's usually temperature. It's not, this isn't always perfect. You know, sometimes you're gonna have to play around with a little bit adjusting your pressure and temperature. But generally speaking, if it's paper rip, it's temperature. If it's you know, the rough feeling in your image area, it's a pressure issue.
Well, I just learned something, so I'm really excited. I always love to have those aha moments. So.
Don't hold it to me. It's kind of more of just an observational thing I've noticed as I've been testing, and I've been playing out, you know, unwittingly experimenting with you guys, saying like, well, what happened to it? Oh, it did this. Try doing this. So far, it's worked out, but I'm sure there will be exceptions to the rule out there.
So don't hold you accountable if you're wrong, but give it a shot.
No, yeah, I only want to be held accountable if I'm correct. If I'm wrong, so it was somebody else.
So you get credit if you're right, and you help them.
Yep.
But if you're wrong, it's someone else's fault.
It wasn't me.
Wasn't you?
You know,
you weren't here.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So what advice do you have for someone who has just bought or is about to buy a Sawgrass printer?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. When I first started working at Sawgrass, trying to get just the sublimation side of it down, there were a lot of, you know, cracked ceramic tiles and, you know, ghosting from sublimation transfers where I wasn't getting the results I was expecting. And it takes time to learn this. I mean, just like anything, you know, working with sublimation, it's a skill that requires you a little bit of practice, a little bit of patience. So don't be afraid to make those mistakes. The same thing applies if you're getting a VersiFlex system. You know, it takes time to really get a good feel for, you know, how that transfer works, what settings with my heat press are going to work great. So, you know, out of the box, you're going to make some mistakes. You know, test with the cheap stuff first before you go to the really nice designs you want to do. Get a good feel with it, using stuff you don't mind making mistakes on. And, you know, then just have fun with it. Because, like, once you get it, like, there's always this, with everyone we've talked to, there's always this kind of, like, aha moment where they're like, this is so frustrating, I'm really struggling. And then we're like, well, try this, try that, try this. And then it's like, oh, it works great. And then before we know it, they're sending us pictures of, you know, some of the cool things we've made here, like the jean jacket and, you know, some of the wood signs and stuff. It just kind of, you get, once that aha moment happens, everything becomes much easier, but it takes time.
It does. And, you know, our first VersiFlex shirt, I wish we had saved it because there were 2 prints on the front, 2 prints on the back, and 1 print on each sleeve because we were trying to get it perfected. And so we just kept trying and trying and trying.
Yep. Yeah, we've had a lot. We cut all our shirts during testing because we know we're going to need, you know, mistakes are going to happen. Things aren't going to turn out the way we thought they were. So We get like the 4XL shirts and just cut them up into squares to do all our testing.
That's what I was gonna say. That's one of the hacks y'all have learned.
Yeah.
Is you found a cheap, larger shirt online and you realized that you could get it and then use that for multiple tests, just cutting the shirt up.
Yep.
It's a good tip is to have that on hand, but it works very well. Now, in general, with both sublimation and VersiFlex, what tips and tricks do you have for our users?
So for sublimation, whenever you're applying your printed piece of paper to the sublimation blank, always use the heat tape if it's possible. Make sure if it's on a hard substrate, you get a good tight wrap, and make sure that, kind of have everything ready to go. Get your print and then your wrap, and then make sure your heat press settings, kind of make sure all that's ready to go before you go ahead and start really fiddling with it. Same kind of thing for VersiFlex too. One of the challenges is VersiFlex is a wet transfer. So before you click print, just go ahead and make sure you have your heat press set up and ready to go. Do a couple quick presses to make sure your pressure feels good, that you're comfortable with it. And then, when you're doing especially like cotton t-shirts, make sure that t-shirt's lined up on the, centered on the heat press. That really helps with the placement of the image with the VersiFlex paper. And those are, and again, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. I know you've given us some good tips that are going to help our users. And just thank you for your time.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's fun being here. I appreciate it.